is really talking about a couple of different things. One is the SIGITE model curriculum, which actually I have copies of right here, so if you would like this. And this is for two-year programs specifically, if you'd like to pop those around. So this is actually a, well, let me give a little bit of an introduction first. So my center is BATEC, the Boston Area Advanced Technological Education Connections. And so we call it BATEC because it's less of a mouthful. So it is Eastern Massachusetts, 6 community colleges, about 30 high school districts, University of Massachusetts, Boston. And we really focus on curriculum, professional development, student success pieces, and partnerships. So I just wanted to kind of give you the context of this. In trying to work in IT, one of the things that we've done is try to look at how do we affect the changes that need to happen. And one of the changes that needed to happen was around accreditation. So one of the luxuries that we had in BATEC was that UMass Boston did not actually have an IT program. It had a computer science program and it had an MIS program. It did not have an IT program. IT is a relatively young discipline as far as the Association for Computing Machinery is talks about, and so that was one of the things that was a luxury for us because we could build it from the ground up. And so we got involved with SIGITE, or the Special Interest Group for IT Education, very early in order to affect that change. So information technology is accredited under the Association for Computing Machinery, which works with ABET. Okay, so that's the accrediting body. And what they do is really look at the programmatic pieces. Okay. And really try to make sure a school adheres to those types of principles in order to be accredited. Okay, and so there's different things around the student objectives, around faculty, around institutional resources, around delivery. They want to make sure that accredited programs have the capability of delivering the systems that are needed. So accreditation is for 4-year programs. However, one of the things that we felt, when you do this, you actually have to go through all of your objectives. You have to go through your outcomes. It's outcomes-based. You have to show that you are, in fact, achieving the outcomes. It used to be that it was much more bean counting types of things, but now it's much more outcomes-based. And so people really have to think through it. And you cannot get accredited until your first student has graduated. So you must have a full graduation before you can actually apply for accreditation. And the other thing that you have to do is you have to show that you are collecting feedback from the, that you're collecting feedback and you're acting on those types of activities. So what's going to happen in accreditation programs is you're asked if you're achieving what you are supposed to be doing, how well are you doing it, are you in fact measuring it, and are you continuously improving. So one of the things that I wanted to do, just as a quick background, because some people aren't necessarily always familiar with the actual 5 disciplines. They don't realize that there are 5 computing disciplines. So I'm going to go through them really quickly to try to give you an overview. And I found these little graphics very helpful because it gives you some of the domain knowledge around this. So this is computer engineering. If you notice, there are basically a lot in the hardware area. You don't see much in the organizational systems, in the applications. You see a little bit in the software area. It's somewhat equally between theory and application, but it's kind of in that middle domain. So it kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like. This actually gives you a diagram of what kind of the types of courses that you would be taking in a computer engineering program. This is computer science. If you notice, it's very theoretical. It's very software application systems type of orientation. The coursework agrees with that type of thing. Again, you're going to see a lot more around programming and operating systems and stuff like that. Information systems, you have much more in the organizational end. Much less on the computer hardware and systems infrastructure end. It's much more applied than theoretical. And oftentimes information systems are located in your business departments and that type of thing as well. So that's one of the reasons you see some of that. Again, the types of courses that you would see, you have much more in the systems development areas, around networks and systems administration, etc. Software engineering tends to be very much in the software and systems area. It's not really much in the hardware, it's not much in the organizational, it's kind of in that middle area. Again, you have a lot of theoretical as well as application deployment courses that you would take there. Tends to be more in the software life cycles and that looks like a lot of other security, various things like that. And then information technology tends to be much more application-based. It tends to not do as much around the hardware and architecture, and it tends to be a lot of the upper level types of things as far as systems and organizational issues and application pieces and stuff like that. And of course your IT tends to be a lot of the, you get into the program, in fact actually let me go, whoops. Well, you get into the programming, databases, security, all of those types of things. So one of the things that happened, this was, as I said, a very new part of the computing disciplines. It became a discipline when the IT volume was finalized in 2009. So it's very new as far as accreditation pieces for this. And at the same time, I was part of the special interest group for IT education. And I started pushing them because two-year programs are very prevalent in the IT space. And I said, you know, we really need to have a way to have two-year programs play actively in this conversation. And so what they decided to do is to join create a two-year committee. And so what we were going to do was try to look at what the types of things were and help give input to the conversation that was happening at the four-year level. So remember, at this time, the four-year people had not finished off all of their accreditation criteria and the model curriculum. What was determined in the conversations in SIGITE was that these are basically the IT pillars, as we call them. This is kind of the IT space. Now, I want to also give this caveat because I know that MPICT and NCICT have really focused a lot on information and communications technologies. One of the reasons they did not do this in this process here is because communications tended to go much more in the engineering line. And so it was one of those that they didn't really want to try to figure out that type of a battle. And so they focused on the information technology that was part of it. Yes?
I want to say that it's kind of a semantic word because you could put networking, include communication in networking, and we could be on the same page.
Well, actually, networking is part of this, and that's what I'm saying. So, right. And so the problem comes in that there's a lot of other things in the communications that are not just networking. And that's where they didn't want to try to go. So networking is definitely there, but they didn't want to go into the full communications end that tends to be part of the other conversations. If you see, it has the basis for the IT fundamentals, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It has the pillars of programming, networking, database, web systems, and human-computer interaction. And if you see, it's completely bounded by information security and assurance and professionalism. So one of the things that they really felt is that this allows for the IT professional that relevance to that process. So the 4-year curriculum basically has 13 different knowledge areas, if you count the IT fundamentals as that. The blue ones that you see are those pillars that I was just showing you. The information assurance and security is the overarching piece. And that's pervasive across all of it. So when you look at this, the 4-year program, and actually I have one more handout. The 4-year program has what are considered 314 total hours. There are 314 total hours for a 4-year program. And so basically, if you do that out with the math for 3 semester credit hours, you come up with just under 7 courses. Okay. Now, remember when you talk about this, it's 45 hours per course. So class hours. That does not count time in lab. So when you start looking at the hours that are listed on some of these types of things, you will see that so these are hours? Those are class hours. So when you look at that, that means there's prep time for it. There's also lab time and things like that that are not included in that. So it's one of those that some people look at that and how are you going to do some of these things in 1 hour? But it's kind of, and again, this is what is important for all students. This is not your specialization. I need to be very clear about this. This is not your specialization. If you're going into computer forensics, because that was one of the discussions we had in there, oh, well, this is important, you know, this is important. And then we had to sit there and say, okay, does every student have to have this exact thing? Yes, a computer forensics student will get a lot more of this, but the core activities for that student, that's what this document represents. So, as I said, 314 hours. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 2-year process. That has 212 hours. Now, someone would sit there and say, oh my gosh, that's almost all of the 4-year program. Now, remember, this is core. So in your upper division, you're going to have your specialization as well. So that's where the difference in hours comes. So I wanted to be very clear about that. So this was the 2-year committee, the beginning of the 2-year committee. We actually had a couple of people go in and out of it. This was in Virginia many years ago. There were 27 members that actually worked on it. You have those listed in the book. 2/3 of them were from 2-year schools. If you were from a 4-year school, you had to have activities with a 2-year school. You could not be part of it if you did not have some kind of a relationship with a 2-year school, because we wanted those people to be able to have an understanding of what would be appropriate for 2-year programs. One of the other things. I will actually, no, start this. So what we did was we took the 4-year document, and the 4-year document looked very similar to this type of thing that you see toward the back here, okay? It looked very similar to that. So what we did as an exercise for the very first one, we took every single criteria that was in that document, and we created this grid. And we broke up the participants, the 27 people that were there, into 3 different groups. Each group went through every piece of it and said, yes for a 2-year program, no for a 2-year program, or maybe for a 2-year program, okay? And maybe it had some caveats. So this one here, it says all 3 of those said yes, this is appropriate for a 2-year program. If you look here, 2 of the groups said yes, it's appropriate. Here, only 1 of them said it was appropriate. Here, you see nothing. So those, they decided that was just not appropriate for a 2-year program. So we actually went through every one of these things and started looking at these things piece by piece. Now, a couple of people in the room, Paula was part of that process. We actually had someone from Ivy Tech that was part of it. And so it was very interesting with some discussions, because the 4-year programs would sit there and say, that's all right, we don't really need to cover it in the 2-year because we'll catch them up if we have to at the 4-year. So, of course, me being the shy person I am, said, whoa, time out. You teach things in your first 2 years. You don't sit there and say to your students, oh, in your first 2 years, it doesn't really matter because we'll catch you up when you get to the 3rd year. And they said, oh yeah, you're right. So then they got back to work and really said, what is it that is appropriate? And so we had very good discussions. So as I said, this right here, you see those 3 up at the top. Those were pretty clear cut that we were going to look at that. If you look over to the side, we did make a few notes that said, well, yeah, if we kind of rewrite it a little bit to say this, then it's a definite. Here you have, as I said, 2s or 1s, and so what we did was, after we went through the whole thing and figured out the ones that we thought were pretty reasonable, then we went back and said, okay, let's talk about these things. And so we had some very rich discussions for a while on what these things look like, what they should say. Sometimes it was the wording, sometimes it was pieces of it, because it may have 5 different pieces in the criteria, and if you take out one of those pieces or 2 of those pieces, then it fit a lot nicer. Again, we've made a lot of notes along the side. And then what we did was we came up with what we considered to be the appropriate subset with some of the notes, etc. And then we started working on some of the writing. And so we actually started now taking this and creating the document that you see here. I was part of the writing committee as well as someone from Ivy Tech. The Pennsylvania School of Technology, Paula was part of it, and Beth Hawthorne, who's also part of the ACM 2-year committee, was also on that committee. So why do you do this? Why do you pay attention to this 2-year document? One of the reasons is because it's really good for program reviews. You can sit there and say, are we actually looking at some of the things that we're supposed to be doing? And it's also great for conversations for transfer. You can go to your 4-year program. One of the things that we did between Bunker Hill and UMass Boston, courses don't necessarily always line up exactly. We don't teach it exactly the same way in each of the institutions. You may have a couple of pieces in one course that are taught a different way in a different course at the 4-year school, and vice versa. So one of the things that this does is allows you to sit there and go through and say, oh yeah, we cover that, but it's in here. Oh yes, we do that, but it's here. And so it's much easier to sit there and look at this. Now, the other thing that we're in the process of trying to decide, and actually I'd love a little bit of feedback from you, is whether you are interested at all in the possibility of creating a 2-year accreditation. It's really not something that has been the case at all under ACM. There are some, I think it's under the engineering, that can be accredited, but not under the computing. And so one of the questions comes in, is this a time, especially with a lot of the federal mandates that are coming down with the workforce, Department of Labor types of things, etc., where they're looking much more at accreditation or credentialing of some sort, the question comes in whether this does make sense. So that's part of the conversation that is happening at this point. So first of all, before I go to the computational thinking, that I wanted to ask you if you have any questions at all about this document, and if you want to talk a little bit about the 2-year piece, and then I'll go into the competition.
Yes. I'm somewhat familiar with the accreditation board for engineering technology.
Yes.
And you made a comment, it was very interesting, and I would like to maybe expand it a bit. ACM Does ACM has accreditation for their program?
Okay, so ACM actually works with ABET.
Yes, that's what I
Yes, it's actually an ABET accreditation.
And ABET for us is
Right.
CAC, not CAC. So the Computer
Right.
Accreditation Commission
Okay.
is what, ABET is what we would use.
So ACM we rely on ABET.
Well, so it's like IEEE for engineering versus ACM for computing, for the most part. So IEEE is not the one that accredits, it's ABET. But the engineering professional society or whatever, is like AEEE or ASCE or whatever.
Okay. And
So ABET is the accrediting body.
and I know ABET accredited 2-year engineering technology program, so they are familiar with the 4 years
Right.
as well.
But that is not the case under the
It's more,
computing.
it's more popular in the East Coast than the West Coast. It's not so much ABET accredited program.
Yeah, that was.
Working in the West Coast.
Well, in computing there is. Because there are a lot of computing programs in the West that are, yes. In fact, a lot of your larger name schools pretty much are, because there are some requirements in certain jobs that say you must graduate from an accredited program. In fact, it's interesting because UMass Amherst has not been accredited, and some of their students are now coming back to them and saying, you know, I'm having trouble now, especially with federal jobs, because they say you must graduate from an accredited program. And if the program isn't accredited, even though it may be a very, very good program, in fact, UMass Amherst is one of the top in the country, you know, it's one of those that it's not, they just have chosen not to go for accreditation. Not that they couldn't be accredited, they just chosen they didn't want to go through that process. So, you know, so it's that type of piece. So the thing that's really nice, as I said about this, is it gives you a flavor for some of the pieces. And I don't know if you remember the presentation yesterday that talks about the T. And that's basically what this really shows you, is the broad-based. You know, you can't just do the networking. You really do have to understand a little bit of programming, a little bit of database and that to be able to be really successful in your job. And so this kind of gives you a flavor for some of that and helps you understand some of those pieces in that. So, other questions? Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, because another piece that is really important in the information technology arena is what's called computational thinking. It's become one of those buzzwords that you hear all over the place. And so CPAS was a grant opportunity that was offered under the Computer Information Systems and Engineering Directorate. So not under the Division of Undergraduate Education, which is where ETE and that type of thing. So this is more of a research end of the NSF spectrum. And so they offered a proposal in 2007 that looked at computing pathways. They then modified that to talk more about computational thinking, because we got one at the very beginning and under the very first round of it that really looked at some of the transfer issues around the SIGITE model curriculum. And then they changed it and said, well, now we want you to deal with computational thinking. So we said, okay, fine. So we said, okay. So we decided to do that. So the piece with this is that CPAS is now gone. It is gone. However, there is a new grant program which is being released this year. The first round of the grants are due in April, and it's called CE21. So Computing Education for the 21st Century. To be very honest, it actually sounds much more like the types of things that we do versus the types of things that CPAS was in the last one. So it's like great. So anyway, but if you look at it, the criteria, the goal of that is to build a computationally savvy 21st century workforce that positions the U.S. to demonstrate a leadership role in the global economy. So that's kind of the aim for the CE21. So the thing that's very nice about that is that, of course, IT can be a very big piece of that. So we got a CPAP project, and part of, again, many of the people in the room here are part of that. And what we were doing was looking at how to advance a successful IT student through enhanced computational thinking. Now, so this was basically our goal and our vision. And so we have 5 states that are represented. So in alphabetical order: California, Indiana, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Virginia. So one of the things that we had all in common was that we had pretty much been involved in either SIGITE and or ATE, so we were really looking at computing pathways. And so what we were trying to do was really think about a computational thinking framework, create some scenarios and a way of measuring that, and then work with faculty to understand what that is and how to use those assessment techniques. So right after this, we're actually going back to work on this a little bit more. So as you will see, this is very much a work in progress. So what we started off with, and what was the premise of the CPATH grant, was Jeanette Wing's thinking around computational thinking. Now, Jeanette Wing is a wonderfully brilliant person. She is very hardcore CS, absolutely hardcore. She came to go speak to some of us who were at a PI conference for the CPATH meeting, and she comes in and, she's very energetic, etc., and she's giving this presentation and talking about these different things, and she says, yeah, this thinking recursively and thinking algorithmically and, or procedurally and abstractly and all this type of stuff. She says, I was talking with this English professor, and he said, well, if you really get technical about this, language learning is recursive because you have to kind of keep refining it, and you have to go back and, relearn things and get a little better at it and stuff like that. She goes, then why can't you call it that? And I'm thinking back in the back going, why would you have to call it that? Because I'm from the IT side as opposed to the computer science side. So that was one of the things that was very interesting with the CPATH grant that came out with computational thinking, because it was one of the hardest grants that I ever had to try and really figure out how to think through, because what I was trying to say was, Jeanette Wing, you're brilliant, but you're missing some of the point. That computational thinking is not only owned by CS. It really can be across any of the computing disciplines and across many other disciplines as well. So what we decided to do was, so we luckily won this, even though I basically said, that you don't own this, and I guess I said it nicely enough. Either that or they thought, oh, well, here's some people who are crazy enough to actually take this on, so whichever way, I don't know. I'm thinking the latter at this point, but anyway. So what we did was we started taking some of the things that Jeanette Wing said and said, what would we call this? How would we describe that? And then if you look at these things over here, these are the types of things that the SIGITE model curriculum said were the characteristics of a lot of your IT professionals. So what we did was we started creating this framework, and we're starting to create curriculum or scenario types of activities that will populate that to help students be able to accommodate all of those different areas. And so we can kind of look at this. So instead of thinking recursively, we talk about process refinement with the goal of improving quality or precision. That's something that someone from an IT company or an IT academic would understand. They can relate to that and say, oh yeah, I know what that is. They may not call it recursion. Okay? The abstraction, really looking at how do you know how much detail you need in order to be successful. And so, these are the types of things that we went through, and we had very rich discussions about. And just because he walked in, I was going to say it, and I don't know. Here's our computer scientist that's part of the team, and so we had very rich discussions because he was part of the same mind and said, well, that's not it, it's not exactly, you know, but we love him, and he keeps us honest. And so it's one of these things where these are the types of things that we feel is a different way of categorizing some of the computational thinking for IT. So what we've done now, and what we're going to be discussing a lot more over the next day and a half, is really looking at this whole idea of computational thinking in IT. So what we've done is we've taken the types of things and created the terms on the left that agree with the things that are in the chart, that kind of the definition which came from that chart, and now we're starting to look at what are those measures. We've gone to our industry partners and said, how would you really start looking at logical thinking? How would you really start understanding whether somebody has that or not? So one of the things is that one of the measures might be that they'll ask probing questions. You know, that they really understand the problem and can clearly define it. That they have clear success criteria for measuring that. So the industry partners have helped us kind of think through this. What does this mean? How would you really understand what if somebody has these characteristics or not? So what we're doing now is we've started actually creating a rubric that goes past that, and I didn't put that in this presentation because we aren't quite there yet. And so that's hopefully going to be coming out in the next couple of months. So above your comments, questions, anything about that? If anybody else from the team wants to talk about some of the conversations we've had.
You know, since I participated in this, I would say it was very exciting experience working with my colleagues from all these other states in trying to figure out an instrument that would allow us to test, you know, the validity of this experiment. And personally, it was a good experience as a teacher because it introduced me into putting in my teaching scenario-based learning, which is something that I've always, you know, educated to do. There is a more teacher or all-type teacher, so it was very exciting, very exciting. And I think we have to get together in the next couple of days to see some of the results of our experiment. And I think it's a research project, so this is something that is going to go on. We have another couple of years at least to work on it. I'm quite thankful to have been asked to participate in this project.
So what we did this last fall was last summer we came up with what we consider to be a common problem that we wanted to use across all of our states to kind of see how would we apply some of these different methodologies of computational thinking to a scenario, and how would we really know whether students got there or not. You know, so we all decided to do the same thing because then we figured that there was a way of being able to compare and contrast types of things. So what we did was security and connecting to the internet or whatever is pervasive across everything. And any curriculum, you could get it in there somewhere. And so what we decided to do was to take a problem where the students became employees in the IT department at their school. And they needed to create the protocol for usage of their laptop in their school. And so we learned a lot from this, because we had students really trying to think through a lot of the issues that come about, because students were always complaining when they won't let me connect to the internet, you know. So we wanted them to have the tables turned and have to think about this. What are some of the issues? How would you go and approach it? So part of the things that, actually, why don't I let a couple of people talk about some of the outcomes, because they were mixed. Some were positive, some were negative.
I only have positive comments. I just loved it, and I love that, you know, the new teaching style there. I was never involved in phonetic-based learning. This was my first time, and I don't think I can ever go back to the traditional way of teaching, because it has changed the way we deliver information now.
I also, it was my first time doing anything with scenario-based, and I had both, because I was doing it online classes and face-to-face classes, and some of them thought, what am I supposed to do with this? Or, especially online, how do you communicate exactly what they're supposed to do? But the ones that did love it said it made them think a little bit differently than to get the textbook and reading it, that they could actually go farther out and find things out for themselves. And that was really nice to hear.
Yeah, so I already talked about it, and I found this experience very exciting, and like Tanya, it was new for me. The comments of the students, I had 32 students, 8 groups that were involved in it. One of the students said, I don't want to do this. I come here to learn technology and all these soft things, soft stuff. I don't come here for that. But he was the minority, and he still did the job. But I had other students who comment like this, this student, she works for SPCA in the area here, and they have 2 or 3 campuses, and she's doing IT for them, and she came to learn more stuff, and she said, that's exactly what's happening to us at work. We have to solve problems, we don't have all the answers, and this is great. So it was very rewarding to hear both those comments. So we have to understand that some students come to our classes and maybe have the skills or don't want to learn the skills, but I think we have to do it.
In our case at Purdue, University of Calumet, we had 2 groups of students, one on campus and another at distance learning campus, where the students wound up taking the asynchronous lectures at the same time the on-campus students did. And for the most part, it worked out okay. There were 4 groups. Of the 4 groups, 2 of them were totally successful. The other 2 were not as incentive-based as they could have been, so that they didn't really do the last 2 steps of the 4 tasks, so that they did the first 2. And we found out from part of that there wasn't enough for the end of the semester. Everything gets crunched up anyway with all their classes. And they felt like, well, why should I spend all my time on this when I have other courses that I got to count more toward my grade overall, my GPA, and this course is not going to hurt me that much because it's not that many points. So they wound up not fulfilling, what we felt was an obligation that we expected. So we need to change our, scheme of how we assign them the points and what they get for them.
Okay, so from Boston, because we do a lot around scenario-based teaching and learning, so we have a little bit slightly different one.
Yeah,
and it was the type of course that was also in.
Right, I think that's sort of the reason we sort of had a much, and I wrote a teacher called class called IT problem solving, where the entire class is designed around problem-based learning. Which is the entire class. So they do 6 problems, there's no tests, nothing like that. Everything is solving these problems. And of the 6 problems or so that the students did, this was their least favorite. So I think some of that may be because the style of class was so problem-based that this didn't meet their expectations, and maybe some of the other problems that have been more, this was not as maybe fleshed out as some of the other problems that we use, simply because we came up with it in a pretty short period of time, and
we had to meet a lot of different needs.
Right, it had to meet a lot of different needs, etc. So it was sort of interesting that the students didn't enjoy this as much. They found it somewhat frustrating and a little bit unclear, and some of them kind of went off track, which I take personal responsibility to. Because it's a problem-solving class, we let them struggle quite a bit, and then perhaps I let them struggle a little too much and kind of rein them in a little bit. So that's a lesson learned for me as well.
So anyway, stay tuned because we will be posting hopefully a lot more. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm curious if you have a sense of if there was a gender breakdown in terms of the scenario-based learning. Is it context-based, which overall the literature and experience shows that females some have preferred to, but as a nurse, and I just wonder what your observation is with regard to that.
You want to come first?
Sure. As far as I remember, I think we had 5 schools. It was a very small class. We had I had 5 schools and 7 boys equally divided. They were paired in teams. I didn't talk to like any, teams. I just let them select. They were just studying next to each other, and I said, let's make up, let's make up your labs for the next one to go around and find out, one who was restricted. Just pretty, they did it.
So I would like to speak with you. In my class, there was out of 32 students, there was 4 women. And 3 of the women team, and I let them self-select. We could talk about that at our meeting about the selection. And then 3 women worked together with 1 man, and 1 woman worked with the 3 men, and she confided to me that she had a lot of anxiety after the fact when I told them to self-select, because she didn't know how it's going to be. She was very happy of her team, but she expressed this antsiness that she had when I said, you're going to self-select. She had no idea how it's going to fall. But ultimately, it worked out very well. So this was an experience for me. So that's my feedback.
So, as I said, over the next couple of days, we will be working on some of this and coming up with some other ideas, breaking this one down, really coming up with some other needs that we have to be able to complete. So, there's my contact information. I have all of these documents electronically as well, if you would like any of those for your use.
And I have your certificate for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I have them on here right now, so I don't know if there's a place for me to post them, but I can't.
So what's happening with Poetry, as you can see, Marty has been there, not only timekeeping, she has been recording the whole proceedings on the CCC Confere, which is the Illuminate platform of the California Community Colleges. And for the whole conference is being recorded and archived. And so you're going to be sent, if you go to the EPIC site, within a couple of days, you're going to have access to all the presentations archived. So there will be, the slides will be there, and the voice of Deborah. Our voices will be a little bit dim because there is only one microphone there instead of the table. But that's the perspective.
Put it over there.
So you look for, go to the EPIC or the ICU Center site.
But if we wanted to do like those documents,
for the documents,
what should we
talk
do?
to you?
Okay.
If they are available, we could talk to we could put them through our center.
Okay. Now, please be aware, as you see draft all over there, because we don't know what ACM is going to do with it. The Ed Board is going to talk about it in their February meeting.
So they are not public yet on the ACM site?
No, not yet. Well, because they don't know how they're going to, they're not sure what they're going to do with it. It is going on the SIGITE site, because, but it's, right now ACM hasn't figured out.
It's just a draft on it.
It's just a draft.
So if we have to on somebody, just a draft.
So, and that's what I'm saying. So the one that will be posted will be a PDF that does say draft. So it should be a big deal. And that's what I said. I don't mind whatever you want to do. I'll send it to you or we'll post it. Thank you.
Thank you.